Hello, and welcome to another episode of MBG Chats, part of the Mastering Business Growth podcast. And today I'm joined by Scott Smith. And I think without further ado, Scott, let's just go right into it. Let's go a little bit of who you are, what you do, what problem you solve, and wind in a little bit of that background as well so we can understand a little bit more about who you are.
Yeah, thanks, Paul. Yeah, first of all, thanks for the invite. I'm looking forward to having a chat with you. And to give you a little bit of a background of who I am, where I come from, and what I'm doing right now, I started out probably almost 20 years ago now in the sporting goods industry. At that time, I had my first job at Nike, and I went into the product function there at Nike. So my career path in general has been pretty much through the product channel or product management or product marketing. Over the 20 years, I've worked for a couple of companies, a couple of big companies. As I say, I had about 6 years at Nike. I had a brief spell at Under Armour before going to ASICS. So I joined ASICS and I was there again for about 5.5 years. And then most recently, since COVID finished, moving back to the UK and working with Gymshark, and finally, most recently, in terms of my last corporate role, was with Williams Racing in Formula One as the head of merchandise and licensing. So my entire career really has been based around the product management function, mainly servicing licensing and licensed agreements. So working with football clubs, big rugby federations has been probably the most popular one for me in my career. And then most recently, as I say, flipping over to the rights holder side and working for a Formula One team. So it's been nice to see it from the other side. And right now, I left Williams Racing and I'm working by myself as a consultant. So I have my own consultancy that I'm running right now.
For the uninitiated around licensing and ownership and things like that, what's like the sort of nitty gritty details of that? Like, without obviously, I'm sure it's probably an hour by itself just to talk about that. But for the uninitiated, what does that actually mean in terms of licensing, especially with like these rugby federations and football clubs and things?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I guess probably the most obvious would be, if you use an example, would be a big football club. So let's say Manchester City, and essentially it's Manchester City granting their rights to the use of their logo to certain companies in order for them to use it, and for a financial for financial remuneration. So in my instance, I've been working in sporting goods and sportswear. I'm going to forget who Manchester United supplier is right now, but I think it's Manchester City. Sorry, it's Puma. So Puma would make an agreement with Manchester City, and they would gain royalties off the sale of every Puma garment that they make with a Manchester City logo on it. So that's essentially what it is. It's the granting of rights based on a mutual return on investment, basically.
So let's take the Puma example as one to run with. So Manchester City would hand over their the rights, the logo rights. Would then Puma create the product for Manchester City, or would that be done through a third party?
Yeah, I mean, Puma are a massive organisation, so they would undoubtedly create the product on behalf of Manchester City. They will have their own product engine, so in the form of they will probably have product managers there that will lead a project, which would be the creation of the next season's kit, and then they would have developers, designers, and people in sourcing that would be dedicated to creating that next season's kit. Yeah, those massive organisations, Nike, Adidas, Puma, would all have it like that. Smaller ones would perhaps outsource some of the work, but for the vast majority, it's all done in-house for the big guys.
Yeah, I mean, I was just thinking, obviously, like, because is it literally just the case of like slap the logo on there, it's Puma and it's Manchester City, and then it's been done by someone else? Because I know I was speaking to someone from Castor, and in the beginning when they were trying to like sort of gain momentum, it wouldn't be that they would fully make everything. It would be like, because obviously they were still quite lean, there would be external partners involved. And I guess obviously it's obvious when you say it, so big, Nike, so big, that of course they would make the kits. But yeah, no, that's amazing. I think that's kind of good for people to understand that as well, because sometimes you don't see behind the curtain, you don't really understand how it works. And I guess like some of these remuneration packages are huge as well, right?
Yeah, especially for your big football clubs or big international federations. Soccer in general is a massive sport, and I think probably that NFL, maybe baseball and NBA are probably up there as the biggest team sports anyway, in terms of sponsorship packages.
Amazing.
But yeah, there's a lot of work. There's a lot of work that goes into it, I guess, that maybe people don't see for sure.
Yeah. So about you then, Scott. Like, did you fall into this, or did you like was it always kind of on the? I say always on the roadmap. You know, some people they take an interest in school, they go to university and study it, and then maybe find that internship. Did you just fall into it, or was it kind of pre-planned to some extent?
Yeah, I think I was pretty lucky. When I look back at it, I was kind of right place at right times. I believe it or not, I was a rugby player at one point, and that was my goal. I wanted to be a fully professional rugby player, and I maybe just didn't quite make the grade. I was offered a contract to go and play rugby in the Netherlands of all places,
Wow.
and in that town just happened to be the Nike offices. Yeah, quite simply, I interviewed for a job there. I got friendly with the PM or the who was leading the projects on Nike Rugby, and I think he saw in me, someone that he could lean on from I guess from being able to understand rugby culture and the consumer, and decided to take me on as a junior product manager, associate product manager, it was called in those days. The, when I started, it kind of felt like this role's perfect for me, because I think about myself during my time in sport. I was always focused on having the best possible stuff around me to help me perform best. So it would be the right boots, the right base layer, the headgear, or whatever it was that I needed. And here I was in a job where I could affect the performance of top rugby players, top athletes, by helping them have the best possible garments and best possible equipment. So yeah, it was right up my street. So I was very lucky in getting that sort of foot in the door with Nike, and then as soon as I had that, I really felt that was my, I don't want to use the word calling, but it was pretty
Your
close to that.
element, yeah.
That felt good. It felt right. That job was well suited for me for sure.
I think that person that hired you obviously, did themselves a favor, because you had the experience of coming through the ranks and experiencing the sport from a consumer and as a player, and I think that's invaluable. I guess in terms of the attributes of like being able to do the job, because obviously the experience is one thing, but what attributes do you think you possess that he saw in or she saw in you at that time, that you think really lent yourself to getting involved in product and merchandising and like looking at that sort of side of the business?
So David Whiterod is his name, and probably a good person to have on and have a chat with as well. I learned a lot from David, and I think one of the things that he mentioned in the early days at Nike was that, and I still believe in this today, is that everything's really based on a spectrum, right? And when it comes to product management or product managers, and this is probably true for all roles, but there's a spectrum from creativity or art, should we say, and then the science behind it. So on that spectrum, everybody falls between art and science, and there's nobody who's really perfectly in the middle and has that balance quite right. All PMs will either fall on one side or the other. I think that he perhaps saw in me that there's definitely some art there in terms of like creativity and knowing perhaps what the athlete wanted, because I was the athlete at the time, or I was the consumer that they were looking for at the time. But I think he also perhaps saw someone that had the ability to analyse and to understand the numbers behind it. And I think every good PM sort of falls or has to do sort of both of those jobs at one time. They have to work with a creative team in terms of designers, and they have to think creatively about how to bring a type of product or how to solve a particular issue, but then they also have to balance, like, what colours are going to be the most popular, and how many units can we sell, and what's the profitability. So I think that's perhaps what he saw in me at the time, is someone that could potentially balance quite well between them. But I'd still say I'm falling on the art side more than the science side, if I'm honest.
I think that's a really interesting concept, actually, because I think the idea of like science and creativity, or science and art, and I know we talk about this quite a lot in our company as a marketing company. Like when you're marketing, like generally you have what we call the heart principles, and that's the stuff that creates resonance. That's the stuff that creates, well, I'm using the word creates, like, it's the creativity side, like the assets, the engagement, and how you make money from the consumer in terms of connecting with them. But you need a methodical approach to be able to go through and understand the mechanics behind it, the outcomes of that. I think that's really interesting. I don't think many people make that relation to product. I think they look at it and go, that's nice, or that looks great, but we don't then necessarily look at the functional aspects of it and things like that as well, like how it fits, how it performs, is it durable, is it breathable, all those kinds of things. I know I'm talking about shirts in particular there, but yeah, the mixture between creativity and science, I think, is an incredibly like interesting concept, and bringing that to product is fascinating, actually.
Well, it reminds me of an old quote, and forgive me, I won't know who the quote came from, but it's that people don't buy for logical reasons; they buy for emotional reasons. And as a marketeer, you're probably quite aware of that. And I think in general, if I'm getting a little bit existential at the moment, business kind of goes in those cycles. So you have periods of time or periods of history where people have been, or businesses in particular, have been entirely devoted to the art sort of side of it, or being more creative around creating products. And then, you know, as history moves on, they start to think about the science of it, and then they become more scientific about their approach. I think there's a really great article written in the Times about Marks and Spencers, and this would be in the early 2000s. And I don't know how old you are, but I'm showing my age here. But when you walked into Marks and Spencers during that sort of time, everything was navy blue, and it was probably because their merchandisers were saying, well, navy blue sells. And say, yes, well, it does, but if everything in your store is navy blue, there is no colour, there's no sort of emotion to bring to the environment, and it becomes more difficult to sell. And of course, Marks and Spencer have had a little bit of a renaissance recently, and maybe again I'm showing my age because now I don't mind shopping there. But if you go into that environment, they've probably learned their lessons, and you've gone full circle, being back from the scientific approach now to the creative approach. And I think that's probably true for all businesses, but certainly when it comes to, you know, apparel, fashion, or sportswear, we're constantly on that sort of treadmill, if you like, that hamster wheel.
That's really interesting, actually. I never really wondered about that. I used to get my school uniform from Marks and Spencer's, and because our school was navy blue, so that makes complete sense now. It's like why that would happen. But I definitely understand the renaissance that you're talking about with it, because they definitely do appeal. I mean, I'm in my 30s, and I buy from there, and because it's good quality, and they've got a real wide range. And yeah, it's definitely, they've definitely brought it back. That's for sure. So tell us about where you are, like, well, the bit between leaving Nike then and to where you are now, because I know you've had like you said, you had stints at like Gymshark, Asics. Were they similar roles, or were they evolution of the roles to where you are now?
Yeah, evolutionary, definitely. So I've sort of evolved through my career into more management function, more senior roles. So going from Nike to Asics was moving from sort of a junior manager role into a senior manager role. And I think going to Asics with quite a lot of understanding and experience after having done it in Nike for so many years, I was able to bring sort of some experience to that environment. At the time, Asics were kind of going for this sort of multi-sport approach. I think you and I will probably know Asics primarily as a running brand, and of course I think most people would still define them as a running brand. That's definitely their speciality. However, they had a really great CEO at the time, a European CEO. Who decided that they were going to go more multi-sport in terms of their approach. So they'd taken on the Springboks and the Wallabies, so Australia and South Africa national teams for rugby, and I think they were just looking for some expertise in terms of producing rugby product. So applying for the job actually was very interesting, because I applied for that job and initially got knocked back. So I got a rejection letter, and I sat on it for like 24 hours, and I thought, hold on a minute. That can't be right. So I wrote back an email, and I said to them, look, respectfully, and this is maybe a learning for anybody that's listening, but I just said, look, respectfully, these are the top points for the job. This is exactly the job that I've been doing. I feel that I am actually a great match for this role. However, I respect your decision, and thank you for the consideration. And then 2 weeks later, I had a call from the head of HR, just saying, "Hey Scott, it's head of HR here at Asics, Paul." Actually, I'm still really good friends with Paul, and he said, "Look, we might have made a mistake with your CV. Do you want to come in for an interview?" And I think I had 2 interviews, and by the end of the following month, I was in Amsterdam, the offices in Amsterdam. and starting in my job there. And ASICS was a fantastic experience for me, because I was going from a junior product management role and sort of now having to take a leadership role. I was going in with plenty of understanding of how to make rugby product, but having to perhaps guide and educate a team that hadn't done it before, or that's maybe not exactly right. They had done it before, but perhaps not in the way that I maybe wanted them to do it, or had envisaged that we do it. So it was great to go in there and help point those guys in the right direction. Certainly learned a whole lot during the experience there. Travelled a heck of a lot, many trips to South Africa, and even learning from the Springboks environment was also really interesting as well, because I think often as a product manager, especially when you're doing licensed product, the presentation part, the sales part of your of when you have to go to the organisation, the federation, and you have to sell in, your design concept for the season, is super important. And of course, for your design, your development, your sourcing team is all hinging on you making sure that you sell in that concept and that you sort of bring it home. Again, that was the first time that I'd led that process. I'd also seen my boss do it. So adding that sort of string to my bow as well at ASICS was super important. And in the end, I had a fantastic time there. I had made lots of great connections across rugby, but also across the brand at ASICS, and again, many people that I still speak to today. So it was a sad moment to leave ASICS, because there was a lot of personal and professional growth done there for sure.
Firstly, I mean, the fact that you didn't take no for an answer is probably a key learning for a lot of people. I think, if you feel like you are 100% the right person for that job, and I just love the audacity of it as well. Like, if you don't mind me saying, I think there's I don't know if that's a Scottish thing. I don't want to make this about like where you're from, but I think there's a certain like brazenness and belief in your own ability to just go, I am the guy for this job. Like, what are you doing? You don't know what you're doing, clearly. You should, and it worked out, and just that sounds like almost a bit of a sliding doors moment where it really could have gone the other way, and you could have not grown. You could have gone somewhere else, their competitor, and affected change there, and it seems crazy. Yeah.
I think it's funny because I consider myself quite a humble person, but I think I know myself quite well, and I think in that situation you're absolutely right. It was a sliding doors moment, and I thought to myself, like, no, I really want this job, and it's perfect for me. Just and again, it's not, and I'm always sort of, I think I'm a good communicator in the sense that I'm always give people the benefit of the doubt and I'm respectful. So it was a very respectful email that I sent, but it was definitely one to say, hey, hold on a second, guys, look at what you could have had. Look at what you're missing out on. And unfortunately, if someone on the other side saw that in me as well. So I guess I kind of not got too many complaints at how that worked out for sure. It was good.
I think that's important as well. Actually, I think you clearly in that moment showed an ability to fight for what you wanted, and that's probably then transferring into that pitch process to submit your design and the production process as well. And then moving into, was it from ASICS to Gymshark you moved?
Yeah. So I've had a bit of a, the last few jobs, I was made redundant from ASICS, so I took my redundancy, and luckily a really good friend of mine was heading up the product management department at Gymshark, and they were sort of newly establishing that department. Everybody I think knows Gymshark, certainly within the UK, right? It's such a massive company now, but the story of Gymshark in terms of how quickly it's grown is, I think, the real story behind the brand. So going into Gymshark, and they're kind of moving from perhaps a design-led business now to having this sort of product management function to sort of coordinate it all. So there's so many great people at Gymshark. There's so much, people talk about the culture of there are so many good people there that I met, that I became good friends with, and people who reported into me, or people on the same level or above that I still keep in touch with. So it is kind of like a little team, a little family. However, after about a year there, they also had a reorganisation, and had to make the choice whether to stay in a buying role which was perhaps the next evolution of where my role was going, or to leave the business. And ultimately, I felt like I'm not a buyer, like I'm a product marketeer, and I had to sort of really sort of stick to my guns there in terms of the type of role I want and the type of person that I am. Now, at that time, I was really lucky because I had the opportunity at Williams Racing to go to that where I was having interviews during the redundancy process, which was lucky, I guess, fortunate. Sad to leave Gymshark in the sense that I felt like I left a lot of good people there, and perhaps a lot of unfinished business, because I think there was still a lot of things for the product management department to do, or to become and to fully realise their responsibilities perhaps within the brand, and ultimately I think Gymshark have now moved to more of a buying role for their product managers. And I guess the difference is that buyers are solely responsible for just communicating with the vendors and buying the product, whereas a product management or a product marketing role is also involved in the creative process at the start. So there's sort of three C's really around that process. There's the concepting of the product, so you do that in partnership with the design team. There's the creation, which is the actual development of the product, so turning a design into a living, breathing garment. And then there's the campaign stage, so when you take those ideas and that marketing story to the marketing team and let them blow it out as a full campaign.
Yeah, I love that.
You don't get that as a buyer in my understanding. I still very much wanted to keep my hand in to the sort of creative and the marketing part of it, because I felt that those were things that I was strong with. So to get the opportunity to go to Williams and to lead merchandising licensing and have that, not only that responsibility for the creation of product there, but also the connection to the marketing department, and get to do it on the rights holder side, that was awesome. That was really, really great for me.
I mean, again, just pointing out, that process, incredibly self-aware and knowing yourself and what you want to do and knowing what's wrong for you to do. It doesn't, it's not necessarily something you couldn't do, but it's something you just didn't want to do. It didn't fit within what you thought was your wheelhouse. And I think that's incredibly important to know as well, because it would be quite easy to stay within the ecosystem of Gymshark and be amongst this great brand and a great leader in Ben Francis as well, and be comfortable. And I think that's where the growth stops, isn't it? Like when you become comfortable. But I love the 3 C's. I've never heard of that before, and not that process. Now that you mention it, it makes complete sense. And is that something you've brought? Have you brought that process into your consulting business now? Is that what you do with your clients?
Yeah, 100%. I literally just started my website last week, scottdoesproduct.com. If you go on that, it sort of details my career histories on there as well. Yeah, those 3 C's are essentially what all sort of products or product creation is sort of based around. The first part of it, the creative part of it is extremely important. It's done in collaboration with a design team. Product manager at that point has the responsibility of saying, who are you creating it for, and also adding in sort of guardrails of how it's going to be priced, because within the context of an architecture, that's what's important at the very beginning, to make sure that it fits in with a product architecture. So if you've got one hoodie you're selling for 65 quid, you don't want to create 2 hoodies. You maybe want to have a cheaper price point, or maybe even a more expensive one. So that's important to be around at that point. The development phase is again making sure that it keeps on track, both from a creative point of view, so that the designers can perhaps realise their vision for a particular product, but also making sure that it works financially for the business. So again, at Gymshark, that was extremely important, because they were going through a period of time where perhaps the garments weren't as profitable as perhaps a Nike garment might be, or an Adidas garment might be. So having someone in the room to make sure that they're saying, well, actually, we can't afford this particular trim or this particular fabric, we have to change to X, Y, or Z. It means that you're taking care of the business at that point, as well as trying to respect what the designers are designing. And then finally going on to the campaign stage, where you're working with a marketing team. And you're being able to take a story that you concepted out with a design team, hand it over to the marketing team and say, like, this is what this garment all is about, this is how it performs. Anybody that I'm consulting with, and it could be that they want help with the just 1 C,
Yeah, yeah.
But I've worked with a couple of small brands at the moment in terms of startups who are looking for sort of some direction and also some clarity around how to price products, how to merchandise them, and then also what the go to market process looks like. How do they get them to market? Who are they going to market to?
It's so important that particular moment. I mean, a lot of people. This is kind of like one of the reasons I wanted you on, is because so many, this is a marketeer speaking to a product marketeer, and it's really interesting because even with the clients that clients come to us and they've spent so much time, so much resource, so much money on developing this product, they haven't thought about the GTM, the go to market. They just haven't planned that out, and I think what's really interesting with what you do in your consulting business is that they can have complete alignment from the very beginning. Like, it's almost like it's not even a case of reverse engineering by the sounds of it. It's like, okay, if we do X, Y, and Z within this concept phase, it's going to make 95% of our GTM job way, way easier. And I think that's something that people really need to understand. If people are starting an e-com business, or, a luxury retail business, or whatever it might be, these are the three things they need to understand, right?
Yep, yep. And I think you're completely right. If you get the concepting sort of part correct, and you do the right things at the very beginning, then it's so much easier. It's a much easier flow throughout the whole process. But quite often, it's about working back. So if you have a date in mind that you want to launch on, so it could be you want to have a Black Friday launch just to take advantage of the sale period. It could be you want to get before Christmas. Could be the start of a football season or rugby season. In order to work back and go through all the steps that you need to go to, that will tell you exactly when you need to start a process. Different companies have different calendars that they work on. So again, working and helping out a couple of startups recently, their product calendar is a lot shorter because they don't have as many steps as like Nike or Asics, right? Whereas in order for Asics to bring, I don't know, 300,000 line units of apparel in a World Cup year to South Africa and the rest of the world, it takes about a year and a half to
Wow.
to plan that out. Yeah. You need to, especially if you're launching like some sort of World Cup jersey where you have a technology story, and then you have to spend 3-4 months just developing the sort of jerseys and the samples. Before you know it, you've burned 6 months of that 1 year, and then you're into a year where you've got a development phase, which is 3-4 months again, and you're working with different fabrics, and then you have to discount 2 of the samples because they're not quite right, and concentrate on one particular sample, and then you get to the go to market process, and of course, if you have multiple regions that you're selling the product in, so EMEA or the North American market, or the Pacific market, you potentially, as a product manager, you have to go to each GTM and
Wow.
present and tell them what it's about. And then there's a sales window, which is 4 to 6 weeks of people going out there and selling in the product. So all these little timescales all add up. So as I said, quite often it's about like, when do we need to get this product to market, or when do we want to get it to market, and then let's work back through all the points that we've got to do. So for anybody listening that has a brand, maybe small to medium sized business, that's, I think, a solid piece of advice, is that to think about when you want to launch product, and then think about the steps that you need to go through to get it to market.
So anyone listening to this, like within the sort of like next week or two, potentially thinking about launching a product for Black Friday, too late?
Maybe, yeah. That's very quick. Yeah, yeah. I think like there are definitely ways to do things on short term calendars. So I did a jersey in, I think it was 2017 for South Africa. So the South African, it was a Sevens jersey, it was a special edition jersey that we did for the anniversary, the 100th anniversary of Nelson Mandela. And of course, for South Africa, that's an extremely important figure. So we wanted to do it justice. However, South African Rugby Union had come to us and said, "Hey, can you do this for Cape Town Sevens?" And I said, "Well, Cape Town Sevens 13 weeks away." And of course, if we're normally developing things on a 1 to 1.5 year calendar, we're like, "Okay, how are we going to do this in 13 weeks?" And again, it takes some strategy, but there are definitely ways to bring things to market quicker. But of course, as soon as you do that, you cut the corners, and
Mm.
ultimately we were able to bring 500 jerseys only, because that's all the fabric that we had. And of course, we only had one shot at delivering it, so it only got sold in South Africa. So if you were lucky to be in Cape Town during the Cape Town Sevens that year, you got an original or an authentic jersey. which was, you know, the Nelson Mandela celebratory jersey. But we did that in 13 weeks. So there's definitely ways to cut corners, but the more corners you cut, there's that sort of trifecta of things. What is it? It's how quick you want something, what type of quality you want. Oh, I'm going to forget now. So quickness, quality, and cost.
Mm.
And normally you can have two of them.
Yeah.
So you have to pick, right. So if you want something high quality and you want it quickly, it's going to cost you. It's that type of thing. We didn't make a lot of money on those jerseys. In fact, the profit that we did make, we donated to the Nelson Mandela Foundation. But doing things quickly is never particularly profitable because you have to pay the price for it.
I wonder how many people understood that process behind it and just thought, wow, this is genius. Like Nelson Mandela 100 years, they've only released 500, it's a limited edition. You know, I'm sure there's like was there a way that the marketing team potentially swung it, or is it, or was it just what it was?
No, I think so. It was a completely local marketing activation. However, the jersey went down extremely well. It was very different to any other Sevens jersey that the team had before. It was very colourful. There was a great pattern on it. So it resonated really well, which I think that made it easy for the marketing team, and of course for them to say that, you know, the story was that it was for the anniversary of Mandela, and it's a limited edition because of, you know, out of respect for who he was. I think it was quite an easy tell. Interestingly enough, I heard recently, I still speak to some people that sort of connected to South African sport, and they told me that that's the most faked Springbok jersey
Is it really?
in history.
That doesn't surprise me, actually.
I'm like, wow, okay. South Africa is a third world country, and one of the issues was always how do we make sure we get the product in at the right price. So we manufactured in South Africa at the time, so we did everything that we could to bring the product to market at a reasonable price. It does happen there. You know, counterfeit goods was always a problem when we worked at ASICS. But to hear that particular jersey might have been the most popular one from a counterfeit point of view, I had quite a chuckle. But it's a shame because the money that was made off of that jersey should have gone to the Mandela Foundation, who do lots of incredible work, etc. So it's a shame that kind of got taken advantage of. But if anybody's listening, they have an original one of those jerseys. There's only 500, so you've done well.
That's incredible. I like that story though, because it just shows, like, even though you've got a specific time window or a shortened time window, actually something quite nice is coming out the back end of that with like a limited edition, very, very special occasion jersey, and it's like locally produced almost, and then locally sold, and there's quite a nice journey to that. And I think, yeah, you're absolutely right. As a marketeer, that's every marketeer's dream. You know, it's like the product will literally just sell itself. Like, just put it in the right places and it'll go. So in terms of Scott Does product, then, you know, obviously it's quite new. You're in the process of doing your website and things. But what kind of clients do you love working with? Like, what's the, if you could, you know, it's like they say, if you love what you do, you're never going to work a day in your life kind of thing. Who fits that bill? Like, whether it be, you know, a particular aptitude to working with you, or a size of business. Is it sporting goods? What's the ICP for you?
Gosh, that's a really good question. I quite like the sort of chaos of a startup or a small to medium size business, because I like that there's problems to solve, and I also, given the experience I have over the last sort of 17, 18 years and in the business, like I've probably seen a lot of problems, and I think being able to go in there and help an organisation realise perhaps why they're going through that and how they can change it and how they can do better. I like to work with organisations who are trusting. There's always especially if it's your own business, there's always a desire, obviously, to keep as much control as possible, and certainly it's to be protective of it. But the easiest relationships that I've had, certainly in my experience of consulting, is always when that trust works both ways. It's always, and again, if you're hiring a consultant, I think pretty much in any field, there's got to be an element of trust there, because they've got to come good on what their promises are. But yeah, I think small to medium sized businesses and the sort of the problem solving and in terms of the growth, sort of growing pains that those types of businesses go through, I quite enjoy that. I think like it's when you're working at Nike or ASICS, don't get me wrong, nothing's ever perfect, but they do have all the processes and resources already well established.
Yeah, they've taken years to develop those, haven't they? They've probably had like multi-million-dollar mistakes that have, that they've learned from, and as a startup or a small business, you just don't have that luxury, and you've got to make some mistakes, but you've got to make sure that they don't cost you enough, and that's where someone like yourself can definitely bridge that gap by the sounds of it.
I think that's a really good point. That brings me on to sort of thinking about sort of mitigating risk, and I think that's what both ASICS and Nike and sort of big companies are pretty good at doing. I mean, I think there was a period at Nike when I was responsible for the product relating to sports marketing events. And one of them was it must have been 2010s. This is going a long way back. But 2010 UEFA Cup final, where Inter Milan were a Nike team playing in the final. And Nike has a mantra, which is win at the moment of truth, which I absolutely love. And essentially, it just means have the product there at the right time. Okay.
Yeah.
So at that particular moment, the sports marketing team had sort of come to me. Obviously, this is a retail opportunity, and they're saying, right, if Inter Milan win it, we have the opportunity to sell a whole load of championship winners' tees. But instead of just producing, 80,000 t-shirts and having to destroy them if they all of them if they won the championship, what we did was we worked out a plan of how to mitigate the risk and how to flow it into the market. So we did 10,000. We took the risk on 10,000 units, and if they didn't win, then 10,000 units would have been wasted. However, we had 30,000 units in backup in terms of ready to go in terms of production over the course of 2 weeks, and then we had a further 40,000 after that were being produced out of the vendors in Asia. So they were the most margin rich. So the object was to sell through everything before the end of the year. And I think that is a good example of how Nike mitigate risks. They understand that they have to have product there at the right time. Of course, Inter Milan wins it. We sell 10,000 units within probably 3 days, and then we're eating into that 30,000 units that's sort of flowing in over the next few weeks. And then we get the bulk of the product that comes in from Asia, which has the best margin. So again, we're now making back perhaps the loss that we would have had on the original 10,000. And I think that's probably how they're well organised in elite businesses, because they're really good at mitigating risk and planning better.
I love that, and I think the from the sounds of that, like it almost becomes a bit of an economics 101 lesson there. Really, it's like you need to be able to check demand. Like I know that's pretty much a 50-50 moment. Who's going to win it, Inter Milan or the other team or whatever, but. You need to check demand. Like, it's like, we don't know what's going to happen here, but we need to be ready either way. I really like that story, and I think that's very, very smart, but that doesn't surprise me with it being Nike. But, I guess, that's a very smart move, but, in terms of dumb moves, sort of like we're kind of coming to the end now, but what is like the one thing when it comes to product, and whether it be mitigating risk or working with partners and partner teams, what's the one big mistake that you see happen time and time again that you wish you could just, it's the one thing you go in and go, just whatever you do, don't do this?
Yeah, that's a good one, and there's one that sort of immediately springs to mind, and that's time. It kind of goes back to my earlier point about if you have a launch date that you want to make for a particular reason, you have to manage the time well, and especially at the very beginning, because you lose a day in the beginning, that's 2 days in the middle and 3 days perhaps at the end. It compounds itself in terms of time, and there's a tendency at the very beginning, especially when you're going through a design phase, to nitpick and really want to get something really right. Let's make this absolutely perfect, and quite often that'll push out something because a fabric isn't available, and then you have 3 weeks to wait for a new fabric to come in, or there's a certain trim that you want. But again, that costs more money or whatever, and then you have to rethink how you're going to apply that. For me, there has to be a period where you just say, right, this is a hard stop. We've got to stop here, and we've got to decide whether we're most of the way to making our goal, and whether the product's good enough to go to market, whether we think the consumer will like it and people will invest in it, or we drop it and bring it back the following season. That's literally the decision that I would advise on, is that if you're going through that design phase, you don't need to worry about it being perfect. You just have to worry about it being right so that you can get it to market. And if you don't get it right, just defer it and get it and do it the next time round. That is constantly a battle. Every big business that I've been at is if you've got 100 items to plan to get through, and you end up focusing on 2 or 3 of them because they're perhaps not quite right. Either stop it and do it the next time round, or if you're happy with it, just push it through so that everything gets through. Because you can end up debating on lots of different aspects of one. Again, it's when you're talking about sportswear or even in fashion, a lot of it is personal opinion, right? Because look at us today, we're dressed in different outfits. If everybody had the same opinion, we would all be dressed the same, we would all look the same, right? So it's sense of style and personal opinion is something that you have to remove from that design process and try and be as objective as possible in terms of whether your consumer will appreciate it and take your personal opinion out of it. And if it does, get it through.
I like that. I think that's really important because it's one of those things, isn't it? It's like, don't let perfection get in the way of progress a little bit. And, I think having product managers in there and project managers as well, like putting those hard stops in place so that, because there's nothing worse than saying you're going to do something and then it not happening because you've spent 3 more weeks on looking at the particular color of laces that go on a shoe or something like that. Like that might make the difference, but you don't know until it goes to market. And ultimately, it sounds like the consumer will be your biggest critic anyway. And if it doesn't sell, well, there's the proof. And if it does, well, then iterate. But yeah, no, that's incredible. Really, really interesting. It's been quite interesting getting really deep on product. And I think a lot of people out there, any entrepreneurs or any business owners that do physical products or merchandising or any sort of like physical product, like we say, that there's a lot to take away there. And I think one of the big things for me that I'm taking away from this conversation, because it's a learning curve for me too, just that 3C process, I think is incredible. Just very, very simplistic, very easy to follow, and you can create your timeline with that by the sounds of it.
Yeah, it's literally the foundation to. I mean, those 3 phases are critical to any sort of production, and I guess I'm talking about sportswear in general here, or fashion perhaps. So, but I'm pretty sure it would probably transcend into other industries and other functions. But yeah, in terms of any sort of process, breaking it down into chunks that are manageable, and then what steps are within those chunks always makes it easier, right?
It does. For those who might have missed it a little bit earlier, where can people find out about you, Scott? Where can they potentially connect with you to inquire, or just DM you for a bit of advice? Like, where can they get a hold of you?
Yeah, well, I mean, we obviously connected on LinkedIn, so that's always a good one. So if anybody wants to find me there, Scott Smith on LinkedIn, you'll know me because I have a little Scotland flag beside my name, just to make sure everybody knows. And then my website, which is just about launched, it should be online relatively soon, is scottdoesproduct.com. So if you have a little look at that, you'll be able to see some things about myself, what I do. On that website, I'm looking to, in the future, I'll be blogging a little bit, talking a little bit about product and the product marketing and marketing in general. And then I'll also, hopefully in the future, coming up with some sort of some courses and things that people can. There'll be some stuff on there, resources that you can get for free, and then there'll also be some paid courses and things that I'll do around product management in general. But yeah, that's probably the best ways to get hold of me.
Sounds grand. Scott, thank you so much for your time, mate. Really very generous of you, and thanks for sharing your experience with us as well, and no doubt valuable, certainly for me anyway.
Yeah, thanks, Paul.
Yeah, no, thanks very much. Appreciate it.
Really great to have me on. I really appreciate you asking. Thank you.
Cheers, mate. Thanks.
Okay.